Hello, thanks for tuning in. I'm Jim Roger, and you're watching the Cosmic Chronicles. You know, there's an old saying, and that is that I don't think there's any doubt that we are not living in interesting times right now. As a matter of fact, if you look around the world today, you see worsening economic conditions, worst economic collapse since 1929. We see the greedy banks and real estate dealers. They've gotten so greedy they've burst their own bubble, and all of that stuff has collapsed. We see a high rate of joblessness. We see extremely polarized political hatred, innuendos, character assassination, anything but intelligent solutions. Okay? And we also have religious terrorism all around the world. And the key is that all of these things seem to be happening simultaneously all around the planet. And our guest tonight on this show, by the way, is here to help us to see more clearly from an astrological point of view of when these things might end, or are they going to get worse. Our guest is, by the way, a world-famous astrologer and a modern-day Nostradamus, if you will. Our guest has appeared on radio and television shows all around this planet. Our guest has also had his own personal very close UFO encounter in France, and he also, by the way, graduated with honors from the Royal Academy of Music. Our guest was also born in the same area of France as was Nostradamus. So, if you haven't figured out yet who our guest is tonight, it's none other than Dr. Louis Turi. Louis, thank you so much for appearing on the show tonight.
Well, my pleasure. Thank you. Nice to see you again, Jim.
Catch us up for a minute on what you've been doing since we've seen you last and what you have in the future for yourself.
Well, we've been working on my project, the Cosmic Code reality show, and been writing nonstop. My audience all over the world reading my Cosmic Code newsletters is growing daily. I'm doing a phenomenal work, and my health is all back together. God, thanks for that. So everything's good.
Yeah, you're pretty solid. Como la roca.
Yes.
You say in Espanol, you're like a rock. You're good. You know, you've got a pretty good track record here with your astrology, but before we discuss that, you practice what you call a form of divine astrology. Could you explain basically what that means to the audience?
Well, there is 85 different ways to run an astrological chart, and none of them has helped me in the past to do accurate predictions. So I create my own, and it is based upon the 16th century divine astrology of Nostradamus, which didn't have a watch or a computer during those days. So astrology is an art. You have to use metaphor, signs, intuitions, and all that I do.
And as a result of that, you have a pretty good track record. You predicted the 9/11 incident a year before, at least a year, if I recall correctly,
Yes.
before that happened. You predicted unusual earthquakes. You predicted one in Palm Springs. That occurred. You predicted a restructuring of all the alphabet agencies, the FBI, the CIA, the OSI, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera,
Yes,
because they weren't talking to each other. They weren't cooperating with each other. So,
Indeed, yes.
so the president dropped the hammer on them,
You got that right.
forced them
yes.
to cooperate. And you predicted that. You also predicted this economic collapse that we're presently in
Exactly.
long
yes.
before it happened.
Exactly. Yes.
You also mentioned earthquakes in unusual locations. And we've had one recently up in New York State. We've had the big one in Haiti, another one in Ohio, of all places.
Well, that's the sad reality, and there's more coming up, that's for sure.
Okay. And you also mentioned certain celebrities that were living in a dangerous time period. I remember on my old show you mentioned Michael Jackson.
Yes, I saw Michael Jackson going. I wrote his name also. A lot of famous people last two years just went off, just like by magic. Again, there is no accident. There is a very specific purpose that is producing all those deaths, as much as in this very city, such a dramatic experience was what happened with Gabriel Gifford. All this is written in light, and I'm going to bring some light on what happened outside of conventional understanding, of course.
Yeah, and we'll get into the Gabriel Gifford situation in much, much more detail a little later on in this very show. From your website, there are some certain months of caution for 2011, this year, and that is June and December.
Correct.
And you mentioned many foreign governments will merge as to bring more scrutiny and peace to their neighboring countries. And you mentioned to battle the depleting health situation around the planet, to battle drug trafficking, gang violence, and to better control the citizens. What do you think about what's happening in Egypt right now?
Well, again, this is due to a very powerful planet called Pluto into the sign of Capricorn. While Pluto was removed by a bunch of intellectuals who have no idea of the essence and the values of the planets, Pluto happens to be the most powerful planet, and I insist, it's not water, it's a planet in action. And in the sign of Capricorn that rules politics, and you see what you see on TV. They are literally behaving like hyenas, killing each other. This power eating is on itself, power against power. And I foresee that in my predictions, in my books, in my appearances. And again, one of the major reasons to what happened in this city is because Pluto is in the sign of Capricorn.
I see. I'm a dummy when it comes to astrology, but basically I understand what you're saying. You also mentioned that large corporations, even churches, different churches would merge to survive. Is that it?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay, to avoid bankruptcy. And you also mentioned that they would be forced to, corporations, churches, not only just merging, they would be forced to reevaluate their mode of operating, their operating mode, the way they do business, right?
Well, basically what happened is with the state of the economy, the government is trying really hard to grasp money from every single places, and they are aiming for this type of groups, churches especially.
Okay, and I guess you mentioned churches, large corporations are hiding a lot of wealth.
Exactly.
And what's going to happen with that?
Well, basically, the new system was so desperate to get this economy back on track that every single penny that can be squeezed, it will be squeezed from every single area, as simple as that. And as I said, the church is targeted. Not only the church, but different organizations that escape with their taxes, put it this way.
So the churches will be forced to pay taxes. When do you think that will happen?
It's already in process. I can see, I'm CNN before CNN, and when I channel information, I see things as they happen. Pretty much when I predict a full restructure of the post offices. I mean, how many they've been closing yet? A few thousands already. So much of my predictions are unfolding, and there's so many of them. The idea, of course, is for the people to go to my website and click on predictions and read not only what I predicted, but what's already transpired, because it's there. And they have to remember those predictions were put on my website well over a year ago.
Yeah, and you know, there are some churches that are literally mixing business with a religion. And there is one organization that owns Pizza Hut, PepsiCo, Taco Bell.
Exactly, yes. It's a business. It's just a
they're
business.
setting themselves up.
Yeah, it's a business, and this is the way it is.
To me, I would think it would have to be one or the other, but not both. Right?
I guess God is in need of money.
And you mentioned that the Mormon Church and the Church of Scientology would probably be targeted.
Indeed, they are already being scrutinized. There is so much going on. Within the next 3 or 4 years, all these people that have escaped, those are abusing the system and hiding behind their good endeavors, these are going to be knocked out by the government. They're going to be paying their taxes.
Okay, and you also mentioned, well, let me ask this as a question, that many of the pharmaceutical corporations will be forced to restructure. Why? Aren't they selling enough medicine? Or?
No, basically, those pharmaceutical organizations, I don't know if you've noticed, it's like science. They're discovering a new planet or